Ralph, it's good to see you as well, my nephew Matt. You know, I am the governor of the state of Connecticut, but I come from an insurance family. My dad worked for John Hancock for a period of time, and then in 1946 acquired a half interest in an insurance agency in Stamford, which led to him owning that agency outright shortly thereafter. As many of you know, that has remained in our family. My brother Bill owns the agency now. His son Matt works in the agency, so it's a three-generation agency at this point with respect to employees. And actually, I have a niece, same family, brother Bill's family. Suzanne has her own agency as well. That little agency, from 1946 on, paid for the education of Bill and Agnes's, my dad, my mother's 8 children. Then went on to pay for my brother Ron's 2 children's education, my brother Kevin's 2 children's education, and of course my brother Bill's 11 kids' education. So investing in and being part of the insurance industry is an important part of our state, our economy, and quite frankly is very personal to me. That's why I have worked on insurance issues throughout the time that I've been governor. It's one of the reasons that I appointed a commissioner who has led the fight nationally and internationally to stop what the Europeans want to do to our regulatory system, which is make it a single regulatory system, as opposed to the system that works so very well for us, particularly here in Connecticut. But you know, the Europeans want things their way. They don't like to deal with 50 states. And quite frankly, they're wrong and we're right. And it would be a blow to Connecticut if the Europeans and people in the federal government, some people in the federal government, the Treasury, got their way. That's why it's been important to me to fight that fight personally, as well as have a commissioner who has been fully engaged with the support of the American insurance industry to oppose those steps. Now I know, you're on the agent side and I'm talking on the company side, but this would have far-reaching impact. And you should understand that without the leadership that Connecticut has played in this fight, nationally and internationally, we would be much further down the road to having a single regulatory agency in Washington, not knowing particularly well our industry, not having the expertise. For instance, Connecticut plays a role in reviewing 18 we sit on 18 colleges reviewing major insurance companies. We lead in 8 of those. We have an expertise in our state which is worth fighting for and protecting, and that's one of the reasons, my background in insurance is one of the reasons we do that. I see travelers as represented in the room. They understand what we're trying to do to protect travelers' interests as well as the other companies in our state. There are 1,400 insurance entities in the state of Connecticut doing business, from the very large to one-person shops on the independent side. Connecticut ranks first in the country for insurance jobs per capita, with far more than 50,000 people employed directly by this industry. Connecticut's insurance industry ranks first for written life premiums. Connecticut's insurance industry ranks second for total direct written premium. In the 2011 jobs bill, which was briefly referenced, we included significant revisions to our captive insurance regulation, because Connecticut had failed to have any new captives filed in the state for a period of 5 years. Let me put that in perspective. In that same 5 years, Vermont saw 5,000 captives started in that state. Captives, as many of you know, are small special interest entities set up. They're not gigantic employers, but every one of them leads to employment. We had none, they had 5,000. We got to work on that in 2011 at the urging of a number of folks. And just last week, our captive insurance policies, our state policies and regulation, was voted the second best out of 37 states that have captive insurance regulation. And what we are now seeing is people move their captives from out of state into Connecticut. I'm proud of that as well. We have allocated sufficient monies to make sure that our insurance department is properly staffed and is staffed to a higher degree than it was when I became governor. It had been run down and didn't have the assets necessary to get all of its work done in a timely fashion. So in a state government that I've actually overseen the shrinkage of, the insurance department has grown to make sure that it's meeting your needs as well. We're pretty proud of what we've gotten done and pretty proud of the performance that you all have done. So with that, let me just remind everybody that a little less than 4 years ago, Nancy Wyman and I were sworn into office in a state that had not produced a net job for 22 years, a net new job for 22 years, in a state that had the largest per capita deficit in the nation. Let me say that again. Connecticut had the largest per capita deficit in the nation and had not invested in itself, in its infrastructure, in its institutions, in its highways and byways, in its rail system, and did not have a toolbox to help small businesses. This is 2011. Didn't have a toolbox to help small businesses, although small businesses were being turned away and turned off by banks right and left in 2011, 2012, and 2013. You know it and I know it. Your clients certainly know it. In the 9 years before Nancy and I were sworn into office, the state of Connecticut interacted and made investments alongside of, sometimes loans, sometimes grants, a total of 119 companies. 9 years, 119 companies. In the in the 3 years since the October special job session in 2011, we have made investments in, alongside of grants, matching grants, loans, you name it, out of a new toolbox to over 1,600 firms in Connecticut. And in one program, specifically designed for small businesses, we have invested in 1,200 small businesses, preserving 9,000 jobs, and leading to the creation of 5,000 additional jobs in small business. And why a concentration on small business after all of the years that the state government had nothing for small businesses? Because small businesses create jobs far more rapidly than large businesses do, at least as a percentage of their size. And you put all of that stuff together, you see real job creation taking place in the state of Connecticut. And if we hadn't done that, many of those firms would have gone out of business for lack of access to capital and operating dollars. What we did was to incentivize not only their survival, but to incentivize their growth. And that's that 5,000 jobs that we talked about. We've undertaken a number of other steps that have helped us see the creation of 60,000 private sector jobs during the time that Nancy and I have been in office. 60,000. In a state that had failed to create a single net job over a 22-year period of time, we're growing again. Are we growing fast enough? The answer is no. Our work's not done until every person who wants to be employed is employed in the state of Connecticut. But I'll tell you this, every month that I've been governor, if you look back to the prior year's same month-to-month comparison, every month we've had more people employed in the state of Connecticut during the time that I've been governor. So we're getting things going. But what else are we doing? A reference was made to an energy policy. Connecticut had no energy department before we came into office. It's one of the reasons that year after year after year, Connecticut's electric costs were the second highest in the nation. Second only to Hawaii, by the way. And far higher than the national average and higher, obviously, than any other state in New England. We needed to wrestle with this issue, and we have wrestled with it, with a comprehensive energy policy that has been legislatively enacted that will lead to 280 conversions to natural gas, lowering our effective cost, will allow for the build-out of a system to deliver sufficient natural gas into New England to run power plants generating electricity at substantially lower costs than other ways of doing that. Why is that important? Because we have to lower our energy costs if we're going to compete with other states in New England, with New York and New Jersey. I'll give you a statistic because sometimes these things are important. We're competing with states that have nothing lower than a 50% penetration rate for natural gas. And we're at 30. We have a built-in disadvantage, cost disadvantage to those states until this system is built out and until people access lower cost of electricity. What we want is cleaner, cheaper, and more reliable energy, particularly to help drive the manufacturing side, where energy costs are by far the second largest cost that many of those manufacturers have. Some other things that I would touch upon. On the regulatory side, we have put a premium on reducing regulation. We did over 1,000 pages of regulation reduction last year, legislatively enacted. And let me assure you, the legislature wasn't so willing to do that. We had to convince them, we had to cajole them, we had to get them to do those things. You all, your organization, this organization, many other business organizations were asked to submit regulations that they thought were outdated or overly burdensome on a cost-effective basis. I'm proud that we have now set up a system to do that. We will constantly be reviewing every regulation that's over 3 years old, something that had not been done in Connecticut in the past. This is a legislative prerogative that they have held onto, and we're now taking our hands off of that and actually having industries help us self-regulate. That is, help us design the right regulations that are cost-effective and aren't as burdensome as those that existed before. On the housing front, because so many of you are on the property and casualty side, we have an aggressive housing strategy at play. Connecticut was one of the few states when I became governor that had no housing department, no state housing department. It's why we underinvested in housing for many, many years in the state of Connecticut. What we are now doing is building housing alongside of commercial builders. I'm not trying to build big complexes in cities or in suburbs that are only going to be occupied by poor people. The concept that we're driving, and this is a good concept for you all, is that housing should be mixed, particularly in urban environments, and should be driven by the private sector with the cooperation of government to make sure that we have communities that attract young people who want to stay in Connecticut, to help us attract jobs that we want to have remain or come to the state of Connecticut. A housing policy has got to be part of that. On the education side, which was also mentioned in the introduction, let me tell you this. New Haven, Hartford, and Bridgeport have seen an average graduation rate increase in the last three years of over 11%. Over 11%, that's unheard of nationally. And it's important because every young person in those environments that we get to the point of getting a degree, who otherwise would not have gotten a degree, is not just a change in that person's life. It's intergenerational in nature. And you might say, well, Governor, what do you mean by that? Well, a person who has a high school degree is far more likely to have a child who gets a high school degree. But it goes one better than that. They're far more likely to have a child that gets a collegiate degree as well. This is about making sure that in our urban environments, and in those three communities and others, including New Britain and New London and others, that we're producing the human capital necessary for us to compete. And we are concentrating on that in a laser-like way and making massive investments in the 30 low-performing districts to turn their performance around, which we have done effectively. That makes a difference in each and every one of the communities so effective. We're making investments in our college system, the Regent system, which is the community colleges and the 4 regional universities, Southern, Central, Eastern, and Western. And we're enlarging those institutions, and we're moving them in different directions. For instance, we're increasing the number of graduates in engineering. Central Connecticut has a great engineering program. Most of their engineers go into data or technology. And most of them stay here in the state of Connecticut, working for insurance companies and others. It's a great feeder for the human capital that we need to be competitive. At the University of Connecticut, we're going to grow the Storrs campus by 5,000 students. We're going to enlarge the engineering school by 70%. We're going to have STEM education increase in graduation by 49%. And we have an added and newly discovered concentration on those professions that are most important to the insurance industry and keeping those large companies here in the state of Connecticut. That is a cooperative relationship between ourselves and those future employers. But I mentioned engineering. When I became governor and Nancy became lieutenant governor, we were losing machinists to retirement faster than we were creating them. And in a state which is the second most concentrated in aerospace, and one of the most concentrated states in defense, we were retiring engineers more rapidly than we were graduating them in the state of Connecticut. A sure sign that we were losing and we were going to lose. We have since changed that, as I mentioned, with our concentrations in education. But what we've also done, and this is important to every one of you in this room has a United Technologies employee and employees in the supply chain of United Technologies. So let me tell you this story. 4 years ago, before I was governor and Nancy was lieutenant governor, on a conference call on profits to Wall Street, the CFO of United Technologies publicly questioned why they were doing business in Connecticut and why they would continue to do business in Connecticut. Our largest employer, 26,000 people, 75,000 people employed in our state in their supply chain, had publicly questioned why they would do business in Connecticut. Here we are. Actually, we got an agreement in February. Between the time I was sworn in and the time in February when we were in a position to announce it, what did we do? We changed that relationship. So much so that they're going to build their new engineering center for Pratt & Whitney engines in East Hartford, along with Pratt & Whitney's new headquarters. They're making massive new investments in Middletown and East Hartford for engine production. They're making large-scale reinvestments in Sikorsky down in Bridgeport and Stratford, and out by Bradley Airport, the old Hamilton Sunstream, but now known as Aerospace for UTC. They are committed to the state. They're now going to be producing in 18 to 22 months, depending on how long it takes them to ramp up at each of the locations in Middletown and East Hartford. They will be building more engines for the military and for commercial use than they have at any time since 1983. They have told their supply chain that they need to double their capacity and then be ready to triple their capacity. That's an amazing story about job growth in the future, taking place now to build up to be ready for that, and going way out to the future. It guarantees a generation and a half, if not 2 full generations of work. That's what the F-35 engine will be used. That's the projected period of time that will be made. And the new commercial technology for single-aisle planes or mid-range jets is something that they have come to own in the bidding process. A company that gave notice, in essence, that they were going to leave the state sometime or over time. That's an amazing turnaround. And it mirrors some of the other things we've done. NBC Sports moving to Connecticut out of Philadelphia and New York. You might say, what's the importance of that? We are now the epicenter on a worldwide basis of sports entertainment. We have ESPN in Bristol. We have NBC in Stamford. It's one of the reasons that we're pushing our state university system in the direction of digital communications majors, so that we can feed those companies as well. And we're in discussions about bringing other digital media and entertainment producers into the state of Connecticut as well. Cigna had a choice. When they decided they were going to move their corporate headquarters and the situs of that from Philadelphia to someplace else, it came down to Texas and us. Now, they already have more employees in Texas than they have in Connecticut. And my fear was that if they moved their corporate entity from Philadelphia to Texas, we would only be on the losing side, as we have been in a number of other transactions involving insurance companies over a long period of time. Guess what? They came to Connecticut. Guess what? Cigna's job base is growing in the state of Connecticut. There are stories like that over and over and over again that predict well for our future. Last week in Boston, there was a meeting of economists and the Boston Fed. Public meeting, kind of a seminar thing, not one of their, where they vote on interest rates or anything like that. And the debate about New England and job production, there was an interesting discussion about Connecticut, which ultimately led to a consensus that Connecticut would grow 25,000 jobs in 2015. But the interesting discussion about it was that if Connecticut had, over the last 20 years, done a better job of preparing their workforce, we'd actually see 35,000 jobs created. We are in a race to make sure that we can maximize the rising tide economically. I know the Europeans have their problems, I know the Chinese have their problems, I know we're dealing with Ebola, and I know we're dealing with the Russians. But if you look at the fundamentals of the United States, we are in the right place at the right time. And I can assure you that over the next 4 years, we will close that gap with respect to training of that human capital, which I so frequently reference. What does that mean for you? A more buoyant and stronger Connecticut means you will sell more insurance, that we will attract more people, that we will build more housing, that there will be more structures to insure, that there will be more people to pay premiums, and that we'll have an educated workforce that will allow us, again, to attract more people on an ongoing basis. That's what 4 years of work, hard work, have done for us. We've handled other things. Irene, Superstorm Sandy, a winter storm that devastated portions of our state, a shooting at a school that led to the deaths of 26 people. We've handled those things, and I think we've handled those relatively well. But what government really needs to be about is two things: getting out of the way, but also still leading, and making sure that we're doing the right long-term things to lay a good economic future for a state. The problem with Connecticut for so long was that we didn't do that. That we managed, in some senses, like companies that had to report their earnings on a quarterly basis, and therefore we underinvested in transportation, underinvested in education, underinvested in ourselves, in our school systems and higher ed. Over the last 4 years, we've made significant changes to that system. So with that, I guess we're not taking questions this time. We used to take questions, but we're not doing that this time. But let me say this. I am proud to have met with you on other occasions and to have attended your events when invited. And I'm certainly proud to have had the invitation to be with you today. My staff wanted me to cancel this. I have to go do an announcement on some of our precautions that we're taking with respect to Ebola. And they wanted to grab this time and have me do it at this moment. And I made it clear that what I was going to do at this hour was be with the independent agents of Connecticut. So thank you very much and have a great day.